rolling.
Okay.
All right,
Ready? So
we're talking.
Yeah.
You've clicked. You've clapped the magic clapper.
Yeah.
We're good to go.
So
All right, thank you. So I did want to ask one more question before we get into this. But do you, when you look at these films that come up, do you look as an actor or as a screenwriter? Like, how do you?
well, if a film is well done, you're not aware of the mechanics of it. You just surrender to the experience, and then when it's over, you go, "Wow, they got me."
That is so
I was
good.
intense. That's. But when a film is not good, or sometimes the mechanisms are obvious. I'll be watching it. So, okay, here's the dopey exposition part. Here's where one character tells another character what that character already knows. Exposition is really hard to do in movies to get background in without obvious things like picture or the wall. Or I don't know how many scripts I've read start with the lead character in their room or in their bed or in their living room, and the camera pans around the room, and we see a trophy, a marksman trophy, and we see a picture in a uniform. They're using props to tell the story. Anyway, so when the manipulation is obvious, or when the screenwriter or the director have taken a lazy way out, then the seams show. It's like looking at a gorgeous model in a gorgeous outfit, or a handsome male model in a lovely suit. When the suit is done right, you just go, "Whoa, that guy looks very good. That's a good-looking suit."
Yeah.
But if there's a seam broken, or if the shirt pattern doesn't match, or some other error, you're going, "Oh, that's just a lot of cloth stuck together and put on somebody."
Right.
And it's not them. It's just something they're wearing. So a good movie is like a good suit. It fits.
Yeah. So you said surrender to the experience.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know if that's something you just said for the first time, but like when I think about Jaws, it seems like everyone surrendered to the experience.
Yeah, I mean that is an accident of creativity operating. Steven Spielberg really understood audiences. He understood camera, and he fused all the elements, and the picture starts with a bang, and then doesn't let up, which is what a good movie does.
Yeah.
It almost like it's interesting because the phrase "surrender to the experience" implies that the experience is stronger than you are. It will overwhelm you.
Sure.
It conquers you. It comes at you, and that's true of all great art and great films, great sculpture. If you're in the Sistine Chapel, the ceiling comes at you. If you're looking at the Mona Lisa, she's there, independent of you and with an attitude. So that's, I guess, what you look for in art, whether it's cinematic art or the graphic arts, or any kind of endeavor. It should get you.
Yeah. So forgive me if I'm wrong on this, but so Spielberg hired you, brought you in as an actor, correct? First.
Yeah. First, I was an actor.
And had you seen Duel before that?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
No, I acted in two of Steven's television movies. I did, small parts because I was an improvising actor and comedy writer.
So were you in Duel?
No, I wasn't in Duel.
Good.
I was in Something Evil, and I was in The Savage Report.
Okay.
Which was a Martin Landau, Barbara Bain pilot after Mission Impossible.
Okay.
It didn't sell as a pilot, but what they used to do is make 90-minute movies of the week at Universal that could serve as a pilot. McCloud was like that. I think probably the first Columbo was, before it became a series, was a movie. And then Steven would direct those because he was a contract director at Universal. And he was the new kid in town. We had the same agent. who put us together to pitch projects, which we'd write together. And we could never sell one because the deal was that Steven would be locked in to direct if we made a movie that we created together. And nobody wanted to be locked into this new kid. So when he found the script for Jaws, he asked me to take a look at it, see if I could find a place for a part for myself, because he liked what we did together and how we worked on scripts. He said, well, at least you'll be on location. You know, we can talk. Maybe you can help with the extras and, you know, improvising stuff and bring some humor to it. Because the draft that he started with was humorless. It was very serious, straightforward, you know, action adventure stuff. So I said, I found a part, and he said, okay. So I got the part, and then he sent me a copy of the script, and it scrawled on the cover, he wrote, "Eviscerate it." So I read it carefully. I made notes, and I sent him a long memo, because that's what we did in those days. You know, I always wrote up my reactions to something. If it was a serious, you know, effort, I mean, if somebody said just asked me to read something, I wouldn't comment. But in this case, it was a movie that was going to be made. It was a movie I was going to be in, probably at that point. I don't think I had nailed down the part yet. But anyway, I wrote a long memo, and I got one thing right and one thing wrong. Because I've excavated that memo. I did it first for a documentarian who had Steven's blessing on so because he was closely connected to Amblin and Laurent Bouzereau. I don't know if you know him. Anyway, French filmmaker. Anyway, he for him, I went down to my basement storage room and excavated the memo that I had written, you know, at that time 30 years ago. And in it, I say the mistake I made. I said, come on, the girl and the boy have sex and then she dies. I mean, this is such a horror movie cliche. You know, teenagers have sex, somebody has to die. I said, can we avoid that cliche? No, but the way she died was so spectacular that it's a great hook into the movie. The other thing I said was, I was already speaking in the collective, if we do our jobs right, people will feel about swimming in the ocean the way they felt about taking a shower after seeing Psycho. And of course, in the AFI 100 best horror movies of all time, Psycho's number 1 and Jaws is number 2. And for the next 45 years or 40, however long it's been since the making of the movie, the first thing that anyone says when I'm introduced is the guy who worked on that movie. If they know I'm connected to the Fish movie, they'll say, after I saw that movie, and inside I don't want to say, I know you didn't go swimming, you didn't go in the lake, you didn't take a bath, So it's all a variance of after I saw the movie, I didn't go in the water, and there's no point in me saying, yeah, I've heard that a lot. It's just all you can do at that point is you nod and smile graciously and say, I know, it's pretty effective. So.
What do you feel like was your greatest win as you were now like stepping into the process of this? And in your book, you talk about like writing the weekend of shooting the following. Yeah. Like when you talked about eviscerating it and then you got to step in and begin doing the work, what do you feel like was your greatest win?
The greatest win was, getting through the dialogue part of the film, the whole what was originally budgeted for, 38 days or 45 days turned into 100 days. And when all the dialogue was shot, when there was nothing left to shoot except shark and the 3 guys in a boat, at that point I could go home, and I did. I took the little money that I made from Jaws and my per diem, and my wife joined me, and we bought a new car, a new small car, a little $5,000 car, and drove it home to Los Angeles stopping along the way to visit my friends in Nashville who were working with Bob Altman making Nashville down there.
Yeah.
You know, we stopped, we visited, and then drove back to LA, and I had the car to show for it. And then it was just a matter of waiting until the film was finished shooting, and then there was additional footage shot when the company came back to LA. This, you know, the scene in the driveway here where the side of the boat is smashed, and then the scene at the lake when they discover Quint. The hardest thing so the win was getting through the movie, you know, creating a new story, fabricating a structure where there was none, and you know, weaving all those elements together and trying to keep the whole film in our heads. Because at that point, there was no script. I mean, there was a script that had been boarded and budgeted, but at our very first big production meeting, which is also like the last meeting before you start shooting. So you read through the script scene by scene, and every department is asked to either ask questions or comment or make sure that they're prepared for what's going to happen. Well, at the point where we did that, it was Steven and I and 3 pieces of yellow, you know, journalist copy paper taped together to make one long scroll with the beats on it. And that was what the new script was going to be. And we were the only ones who had it in our heads. So we sat there with all these department guys who were looking at script pages that said, you know, interior lighthouse. And Steve and I would say, scratch the lighthouse. We're going to drive by it. We're never going to be in there. The Brody house, we're going to be in there a lot. Make sure it's completely dressed up upstairs and down. There's going to be a lot of footage in the Brody house. You know, police station, we're going to be in there. We're going to be in the town hall. You know, we knew where we were going. We didn't know exactly what the dialogue would be when we got there. But I would have to write something for the actors to get, you know, when they got to the set in the morning. Or, you know, with luck, if the scene was approved a day or a week or before shooting, the actors would actually get sides so they could study their lines. But a lot of times, scenes were written days or sometimes the night before.
Wow.
So, you know, it's interesting. If you see the release print, I frequently comment that the hardest thing I did as a writer on that film was write out my character, because the character was much more important in the script that I read before I started changing it. So I thought I was very selfless. But if you see a release print of Jaws, you know, from the 1975, I have a wonderful screen credit. It's, you know, it's Scheider, Dreyfuss, and Shaw, Jaws, starring Carl Gottlieb, Lorraine Gary, and Murray Hamilton. I had equal billing with the wife and the mayor.
That's great.
Because the part was that big.
Yeah.
But by the time, you know, it came to the, you know, television release, it was, you know, the credit was shrinking. I still get an acting credit.
Yeah,
but
sure.
Not as important as it once was.
Was the vibe, like the feeling, the vibe among shooting days? Because looking back on it, you guys talk about, you know, again, there's some miracles that happened through it because no one had ever done this before. Was there that kind of vibe on set, like we're doing something, or was that looking back, like was there frustration?
It was a long, hard job at a difficult location. Martha's Vineyard is a beautiful island. It's well worth the expense of going there for a vacation. It's not an inexpensive resort. But the powers that be on the island had mixed feelings about a movie shooting in their midst. You know, for many of them, a film company on location was a big bother and an intrusion into their comfy little world. We were perpetually behind schedule and over budget, so the suits and the people charged with the physical production were nervous and anxious and angry, and you know, so it was a hard job, but the beauty of that was it was a studio production in in the old style. You know, a studio that had a camera department and a prop department and a special effects department, and guys who had been on many, many pictures and guys who had worked together on different pictures. And I'm not the first to notice this, but a film company on location is kind of like a platoon out on patrol during a war.
Right.
And you're fighting a war to try to, get your day, to get the what's on the schedule to be shot. You're trying to get performances out of the actors. You're trying to get special effects to work. There's all kinds of daily problems that have to be solved. Much like being in combat, and suddenly there's snipers over there. Well, we didn't plan on snipers over there, but we just got killed, so now we have to adjust. So there was that. There was this constant adjustment to the circumstances. So it was very hard work.
Yeah.
And at the end of it, and as it progressed and as it became obvious we were going to be seriously over budget and over schedule, everybody just dug in and said, "All right, let's just do the work. Let's finish what we started. We do want to finish. Nobody wanted to turn tail and run.
Right.
And there was a moment when the suits came to the vineyard to visit to see why we were so late and expensive, and they concluded that that was a given. That was the circumstances of that particular shoot. It would have been loved to have been do it in 55 days for the budget that was allocated, but that wasn't to be, because there was no CGI or computer special effects or anything.
Everything up.
Yeah, everything in the movie is real. If you see it on the screen, it was that big,
Physical.
it was that size, and it moved that way.
Yep.
And that is an illusion that's very difficult to achieve, and that's what took a lot of time.
Yeah. What was the age difference between you and Spielberg at the time?
Let's see.
He was 26.
I was 36. He was 27.
About 9 or 10 years.
Yeah, 8 or 9 years. Yeah.
And you refer to Richard Dreyfuss as Ricky in your book because that's how you knew him.
Yes. Dreyfuss was
about the same age as Spielberg.
Yeah, he's about. Yeah, they're very similar in age.
Yeah.
But I knew Dreyfuss because he had been a member of a improvisational comedy group that was heavily influenced by the improvisational comedy group that I was in, which was called The Committee. And Richard and Rob Reiner and David Arkin and Bobby Shaw and Marty Dusay, they had a little company called The Session, and they would come up to San Francisco to watch us work, and then we'd go down to LA to try to find work because, Richard had already was working steadily. I think Phil Mishkin was his agent. No, Meyer Mishkin was his agent. Phil Mishkin was his writing partner. So he was already working as he was a working actor, mostly in television. It's an episode of Gunsmoke where he plays the little Jew.
That's great.
Yeah, no, he had already had a body of work when he did Jaws, but he had passed on the script, and he was out promoting Duty Kravitz, and happened to be in New York when I was with Steven in Boston, and we were able to get him to come up to Boston and talk about taking another look at the script because he had passed on it. I mean, notoriously, he said, "This is a movie I'd rather see than be in." So we brought him out to Boston. He walked into the room wearing that scruffy beard and a Levi jacket and rimless glasses and a watch cap. And Steven said, "Don't change anything.
Right.
This is, that's how you should look."
Oh my gosh.
And
the reason I asked about the age is because I know Spielberg has always always infamous for bringing great people around him. He's a very team player, and and so I was just curious, did you feel this? I don't know, just because you had a few more years on him, did you feel any sort of mentor, wisdom piece to this? He was really a movie guy. Yeah.
And at that point, I was a television guy.
Yeah.
And there was a real chasm between those, and people in television wanted to be in movies. There was a definite hierarchy at that point. And Steven had been started in television, but he wanted to go to features, and when he made Duel, it was released in Europe as a feature, and he was heralded as a new director to watch in Europe, especially France, before anybody in America knew who he was. They were already, I was in Europe in '73 or '74, and I remember going to a cinema store to buy some stuff, and there were postcards for Duel, with with picture of the truck, and it's directed by Steven. Un film de Steven Spielberg. So he was. I was a mentor to him in the sense that he was a new kid in Hollywood. He was working, and he spent all his time learning, doing, practicing. And I had a little house in the flats near Gardner Street, where my wife and I had kind of a salon. It just happened that a lot of musicians, friends from San Francisco were coming through L.A. Chris Christopherson was sleeping on my couch, and there was at any given moment there'd be a lot of people from the counterculture. It was a stopping place. If you lived in Laurel Canyon, as most musicians did then, you could stop at our house on the way to or the way from the recording studios in Hollywood, and Wally Heider's, Sunset Sound, all of those places, or the Hollywood Bowl or the Greek Theater. You could come by after the show and get high, or get high on the way to the show. And Steven never got high. He was very serious about his work. And I remember when he got his television money, and he was making good money, he got a new car. Very, very proud of it. And it was an orange Pontiac Trans Am with a spoiler. It looked like a slot car, but the big one. And he drove it to my house and parked it, and we looked, admired it. But within weeks, Steven, who has a very keen sense of fitting in, looked around and said, "Oh, this is the car that an Arizona kid from Phoenix would get with his first big paycheck. Everybody else is driving Mercedes." And so right away, the Pontiac, I don't think, lasted 6 months, and he had the classic starter Mercedes, which was, I think, the 220 coupe, little two-door with the roof that came off. Yeah. Joni Mitchell still has hers that she bought with her first big check. She bought a little Mercedes, which she still owns. She calls it Bluebird.
That's great.
But that was the starter car for Hollywood people. So and then Steven very quickly became a Hollywood person.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. So in the movie, there's this moment with Shaw and the USS Indianapolis monologue. That wasn't in the book, was it?
No.
This came from you?
Nope, it came from Howard Sackler, who was the intervening writer.
Oh, okay.
Peter Benchley wrote the book and just made Quint monomaniacal, patterned him on a sport fisherman in Long Island named Frank Mundus, who was the first guy to go sport fishing for shark. But he never explained Quint's attitude.
Sure.
So Howard Sackler, who wrote the script after Peter Benchley, what happened? Peter Benchley wrote a novel. It was bought for the movies. Part of the deal was he would get to write the screenplay. He wrote a screenplay. He was not a screenwriter, so they immediately hired, I don't know, a real screenwriter. It was Howard Sackler, who had written Great White Hope and Gray Lady Down, and had done Broadway. So he wrote a very serviceable but ordinary script. But he did find the Indianapolis situation and put that in the movie. And
did you touch it at all, or did you just?
Oh
let
yeah,
it sit?
we were all nervous about it because it's like 2 pages of dialogue.
Yeah.
And in any iteration of the script, it's like, oh my God, the actor is going to blanch when he comes to that. So Steven asked all his writer friends to take a crack at the script. I mean, John Milius, Paul Schrader, George Lucas, Bob Zemeckis, Bob Gale. You know, he asked them all to, work on it. And ultimately, it was Robert Shaw who took all this pile of paper, different versions of the script, and turned it into the monologue that you see in the movie. That was Robert Shaw. Because people forget that Robert Shaw was a Pulitzer Prize winning playwright for the Man in the Glass Booth.
Right.
And he had published 5 novels as an actor. He
could write.
He could write, and he wrote that basically. In my book, The Jaws Log, I address the misconception that another writer had something to do with it, and I say, who do you believe? The guy who was there and tells you he didn't, or the guy who wasn't there and claims to have written it? So anybody who wasn't there who claims to have written it is wrong. And even Sackler, and I only learned this in the last 5 years, there's a book called Shark, the something predator of the sea, published in 1960-something. And there is a segment in the book which is lifted almost verbatim by Sackler and put into his script. And it survives because in Shaw's version, he talks about Herbie Robinson, a bosun's mate, and he touches him and he turns over and he's been bitten. Right. That's a published account that's in a book written 25 years before Jaws. Some fan found it and pointed it out to me.
That's fascinating.
So and I didn't, as I say, success has many parents, failure's an orphan.
So you've kind of now had a front row over the years after this movie comes out and shakes everything up. Yeah. I mean, the point of view from the shark and how that just changed the way. I would say we were talking about some of the jump scare moments that Gardner's had, like that really wasn't much of a thing up until that point, but now jump scares are everywhere, and after Jaws, the iterations, even up until a couple years ago with the Meg, which it's hard not to look at the Meg and go, well, that just kind of looks like a new version of Jaws.
Yes.
So for you, what's that like to kind of sit front row and see all this happen?
I guess it's a tribute to the subject matter that it can sustain.
Right.
All of that, but it reminds me that there are certain movies that we love that have been remade, in various. Currently, Star is Born is about the 5th version of that film. There's people, I guess, go back to the well when there's something, nourishing there. I remember right after Jaws came out, I was offered a movie called Paws, P-A-W-S, seriously, about a rogue bear in the Pacific Northwest who terrorizes a resort town, and I turned it down.
Gracefully turned it down.
It didn't stop Dino De Laurentiis. He made Orca, which was where the killer whale is the killer fish.
Yeah.
But it was, a villain we hadn't seen before. If you think about the horror movies, most of the great villains in horror movies were Dracula, or the Wolfman, or zombies, or pick a lethal supernatural force. Nobody had done the shark yet. And that was the genius of the novel, is that the shark is a character. It doesn't think, but the novel opens with the shark swimming, just like the main title credits.
Yeah. As one of the key people that brought it to life, how do you receive all of that personally? Like when you look at all this, there's the professional side that says, yeah, this is all about, how do you receive it? Is it something you kind of go, well, it's kind of cool that I've been a part of some of that?
I've had the good fortune to be attached to 2 or 3 or 4 iconic things in my life. The comedy I did with Steve Martin is, a classic. The Committee was a classic improvisational theater group. The Jaws Log is the best-selling book about the making of a movie ever, and even after other movies have surpassed it at the box office, it's still a great book about it. Basically, you just kind of thank your lucky stars. It's unknowable. You can't plan a career about, you can't say, and when I'm 35, I will try to have an iconic film in my repertoire. Jaws was, I had written, paid for screenplays before that I had written, but none of them had been produced. Jaws was my first produced screenplay. So it's kind of like a roller coaster ride. You just have to buckle in and take the ups and the downs and the swoops and the turns and try not to throw up and try to be gracious when you get out of it and say, and when your little niece says, "Let's go again," you go, "No, I don't know." It's being connected to an iconic project is you can't plan for it. You can be graceful about accepting the public's love for it. You try to be modest. You try not to say, "Yeah, I know we did a great job." But we did, but it was after the fact. At the time we were doing it, we were just doing a job. I'm sure that the statue of David, Michelangelo was, just working on a piece of marble, like he said, he just cut away all the parts that weren't David, and then there was the statue. Now the fact that it's endured for 500 years as a work of art, that's like after the fact. So you kind of learn to accept it as part of your DNA. It's kind of baked in. They can't take it away from you. But it's folly to let yourself be defined by your hit. That's a mistake, I think. Very early on, I remember there was a wonderful playwright and a cartoonist named Herb Gardner who created a very funny character. Cartoon character, and he wrote a movie, a play, and then which became a movie, and he obsessed about his authorship of this play, and he would keep in touch with Samuel French, who had licensed the amateur rights, and whenever there was a production of, I think it was 1,000 Clowns. Whenever there was a production of 1,000 Clowns, he'd pay his own way to the theater and stand out front and said, "I wrote this," And I heard that story, and I said, "Geez, I hope I'm never that guy," he just let it overwhelm him and define him. And you'll see actors who become one of their characters or identify with it and try to be that person for the rest of their lives. But you can't control it. You can't make it happen. It happens totally without your control. We don't tell the audience what's a hit, they tell us. So, all you can do is accept it and, be grateful and see if you can take it to the bank.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can't. Sometimes, it's just, part of who you are.
The full circle of surrendering to the experience.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, that's what. Yeah. As a contributing artist or a contributing creative force, you surrender to the experience that force creates in others. You just have to. Yes, it's a hit. Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy to have been a part of it.
That's great. So one thing I want to tell you, so this show that we've developed and that we're trying to put forth is the idea of kind of going beyond the backlot, in the sense of going beyond the things that are essentially at times like, manufactured in a way and disposable, but hitting up at the places that are real and the places that helped, like locations that were part of the character. And as just for you as a writer, you wrote in physical locations, physical places
Yes.
that were. Is it a shift for a writer to go beyond that medium? Like, do you have to think differently for, like, I think about writers now that we were talking about, like, other movies where it's just a complete blank slate. Like, as a writer, when you're sitting there in Martha's Vineyard, does that just make it easier because it's right there at you? And
sure. You can find scraps of dialogue, and people are saying to each other on the street, and you mentally go, oh, I can use that. There was a character in the movie, Craig Kingsbury, who played Ben Gardner, who had a very colorful turn of phrase. Steven said, just follow around, write down what he says. And there's some Craig Kingsbury-isms, in the script, right from his mouth to my typewriter. There's no substitute for being on a location and working with actors who are going to be saying your lines, because you can hear their voices. When you're starting with a blank slate and you're writing a film that has no director and no actors attached, it's just you're writing a story, you have to write a really good story and hope that the characters are alive and hope that actors will come to that script and inhabit those characters and make them their own, and the director will share your vision and amplify it and do what directors do. There's no substitute for that, and there's no substitute for writing for a company of actors. I mean, the best dramatic works in the history of the world, whether it's Shakespeare or Eugene O'Neill or Molière or David Mamet in current times, they wrote for a company of actors. They wrote for human beings who they knew, who sounded kind of like the characters that they were creating. And that's a tremendous leg up when you're in the creative process, if you have a person in mind. And I had the good fortune of writing for actors who, when I finished the script, they would say the words and I could listen to them, and if I got it wrong, I could either change it on the set or trust the actors to improvise an alternative version. And Steven would encourage the actors to do what they would with the script. So that part of it worked out great.
Thank you so much, Carl.
Okay.
I appreciate it, man. And I tell you, I watched it. There it is. This is his book. I call it the Gospel of Jaws because it's like reading one of the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke's perspective. It's like you're the disciple that you're writing down everything you saw and experienced.
I once wrote a screenplay based on Revelations.
Okay.
Which is the crazy book of the Bible.
It is. It's like the acid trip version of the Bible.
Exactly. But I wrote a very, very interesting script based on that with an Antichrist.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It's
Did it go anywhere ever?
No, it was a commissioned script. I got paid for it, and the financing dried up. It was a pretty ambitious script. And,
I would imagine. It'd have to be.
But it was about a charismatic young man who is the guy. This is the second coming.
Well, you want to do a real quick thing, just into the camera kind of thing with a book, and just kind of that way you have a pickup with him here. So, okay, well, let's do that real quick. So, sitting here with the author of The Jaws Log, and it is the best-selling book by the man who was part of it himself about a movie and how the movie happened and how the movie got made. And so we highly recommend it. I've read it. It's a great book, and you can get on Amazon.
Wherever books are sold.
Wherever books are sold. Thanks, Carl. Appreciate your time, man. Thank you so much.